I always thought surprising my parents with a dream vacation would be the best thing I'd ever do for them. I'd been saving for 3 years, quietly, carefully, skipping weekends out, ignoring every flight deal I saw for myself. My plan? A week-long escape for my parents, Gloria and Harlan, to Austria. They always talked about seeing the Alps, trying Viennese pastries, dancing to Mozart in Vienna, but they never had the means. Always some excuse. Bills, retirement, Eli. And that's the part I need you to understand first, Eli, my younger brother, the sensitive one, the baby of the family, except he's not a baby anymore. He's 27, hasn't worked a real job in years, and still lives in our parents' basement playing crypto and Call of Duty like he's auditioning for a role in Failure. But I digress. Back to the plan. I covered everything: first-class flights, a 5-star stay near the Schönbrunn Palace, private excursions, gourmet dining. I even booked a spot for myself. I wanted to be there, to share the moment, to feel like part of something meaningful. I didn't tell them in advance. I wanted the surprise to be big, memorable. It was, just not the way I thought. The morning of the trip, I pulled into their driveway. I was grinning like an idiot. I had the itinerary printed out in a little folder, tied with a ribbon. I imagined their faces lighting up when I handed it to them. I imagined my dad, Harlan, clapping me on the back like he used to. My mom hugged me tightly. Instead, I saw luggage. My parents were waiting outside, and beside them, Eli, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, smirking like he'd just won the lottery. I blinked. "Why is Eli here?" I asked. My mother beamed. "Oh, we forgot to tell you," she said, like she forgot to water the plants. "Eli's taking your place." I thought she was joking. I really did. "You're serious?" I asked. Eli stepped forward, his grin widening. "They thought I needed the break more than you. You travel for work all the time, right?" I didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. My mother nodded like this was the most logical thing in the world. "Sweetheart, you work so much. You've been to Boston and San Diego this year already. Eli's been really stressed lately. This will be good for him." Right. Stressed. From all the sleep-ins and YouTube rabbit holes, I guess. I looked at my dad, praying for a lifeline. He just shrugged. "It's settled. Come on, let's head out. We shouldn't be late." And that was it. Just like that, the gift I'd poured my soul and savings into, stolen. No apology. No consideration. Just Eli hijacking the one good thing I tried to do for my family. I should have screamed. Should have demanded the tickets back. Told them they were being unbelievably selfish. But I didn't. I said, "Okay, let's go." I smiled. I drove them to the airport. Eli sat in the back, talking nonstop about all the things he wanted to buy in Austria. Anime figurines, Austrian beer, something about a thermal spa he saw on TikTok. My mom giggled like this was cute. My dad kept checking the flight details like it was any other day. Me? I was silent, seething. But my mind was working. And when we pulled up to the terminal, I had already made my decision. They got out of the car, laughing. Eli slung his bag over his shoulder like some budget Bond villain. My mom kissed my cheek. "We'll send you pictures. Love you, honey." Eli fist bumped me. "Appreciate it, bro. You're the best." My dad slapped me on the shoulder. "You're a great son." And for the first time all morning, I smiled. Because they had no idea what I had just done. While they were sleeping last night, something didn't sit right. I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. Their entitlement, their absolute certainty that I'd just hand over this trip like it was nothing. So at 3 a.m., I logged into the airline app, and I made some changes. I canceled Eli's flight and their return tickets. Not just canceled. I deleted every record. Poof, gone. They were holding boarding passes that were basically paper scraps. 10 minutes after they walked into the airport, my phone buzzed. "Mom, sweetie, something's wrong." "The airline says the tickets are canceled?" I took a deep breath, then replied, "Oh, really? That's odd." Another message, "Dad, fix this, now." A third, "Eli, bro, what's going on? Did you screw up the bookings?" I drove away from the terminal, calm as a monk, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The silence after I sent that last text was delicious. I didn't rush home. I took the scenic route. Windows down, music up. I let the air wash over me like a long overdue rinse of all the resentment I had bottled for years. This wasn't just about the vacation. It was never just about the vacation. It was about being invisible, about being used, about giving and getting nothing but the assumption that I'd give more. I pulled into my driveway an hour later. My phone had practically caught fire. 17 missed calls, half from my mother. The other half split between Dad and Eli. Then came the texts. My mom was first. "How dare you do this to us after all we've done for you?" Followed by, "You humiliated us at the airport. They think we're scammers." Dad's messages were shorter, angrier. "Fix this now, not a joke." "You crossed the line." And Eli, "Oh, Eli, bro, WTF, you owe me. This is beyond messed up." I didn't reply. Instead, I set my phone to do not disturb, tossed it on the kitchen counter, and made myself coffee. Real coffee. The kind I usually reserved for weekends and guests. Today, I was the guest. Today, I treated myself. By the time I sat on the couch, sipping, calm again, I knew what had to come next. See, my family thrives on two things: control and public image. They might yell behind closed doors. They might dismiss me at home. But in public, online, they're picture perfect. The doting parents with two wonderful sons. Always so proud, so blessed, so curated. So I gave the public something else to see. I opened Facebook, and I posted, wishing my parents and brother a wonderful trip to Austria. I was supposed to go with them, my gift to them. But at the airport, they decided my brother needed it more. So I canceled the tickets, all of them. Hope they enjoy the non-refundable vacation I paid for. Then I logged off and waited. The reaction came faster than I expected. Within 20 minutes, my cousin Natalie messaged me. "What the hell? They left you behind?" Then came Paul, an old high school friend. "You paid for it, and they gave it to Eli?" A family friend commented on the post directly. "I'm honestly shocked." That's so cruel. Every ping of a notification made me smile. It wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. For once, I wasn't hidden. I wasn't silent. And they couldn't twist the story before I told it myself. Then came the final twist of the knife, for them. See, what no one knew was that I hadn't booked return flights for Eli or my parents. I had always planned that to be a surprise. A first-class return home to celebrate the week together. Lounge access. Champagne. Real pillows. But the moment they cut me out, I never added Eli's return flight. And the ones for Mom and Dad? Canceled. So even if they somehow managed to rebook new tickets and get on the flight, they were stuck. Stranded. International flights are brutal, especially last minute. Especially non-refundable. Let's just say karma's baggage fees are steep. Later that night, someone knocked on my door. I already knew who it was. I checked the peephole. Dad. He stood there, arms folded, jaw clenched. Like always, when he was about to deliver one of his serious talks. I opened the door slowly. He walked in without asking. Didn't say hello. Just stood in my living room like he owned it. "You made your mother cry," he said. I stared at him. "She made me disappear." He didn't like that. I could see it in the twitch of his brow. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone," he said. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No, you embarrassed yourselves. I just gave everyone context." He took a deep breath. That fake, composed inhale he always used when he was trying to lead the room. "This was a mistake," he said. "I'll admit that, but you overreacted, and you need to fix it." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Fix it?" I said. "How do you fix being told you don't matter? How do you fix being erased from your own gift?" His face dropped. The look of a man realizing his script wasn't working. Then he tried the classic line. "We're a family." "No," I said. "We're people who share a name and a history." "That's not the same thing." He didn't respond. I walked over to the door and opened it again. "You should go," I said. "Your flight's not leaving, but you are." He stared at me one more time. Like maybe I'd break. I didn't. He left without another word, and I locked the door. I went to bed with a strange sense of peace that night. No guilt, no weight, just the warmth of knowing that I finally chose myself. Of course, I knew it wasn't over. There'd be fallout. Mom would rally the sympathy squad. Eli would play the victim, maybe even try to spin a new version that I canceled out of spite, that I was unstable, dramatic, ungrateful. Let them. I was done playing defense. The next morning, I checked my messages. Sure enough, Mom had posted a now deleted status, prayers for a difficult family situation, heartbroken. The comments weren't what she expected. They were on my side. Some called her out directly. Others sent me private messages saying how proud they were that I stood up for myself. A few even shared their own stories of being the forgotten sibling. It was like pulling back the curtain and realizing there was a whole community on the other side, watching, understanding. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. One message stood out. It was from my aunt, my mom's sister, Vanessa. I've always seen how they treated you. I was hoping one day you'd speak up. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I stared at that message for a long time, because she had seen me, even when I didn't know it. Later that afternoon, I got another text from Eli. This is on you. You ruined the trip. You're making Mom sick with stress. Hope you're happy. I responded simply, I didn't ruin anything. You just learn what life looks like without a golden parachute. No reply. Finally. That night, I poured a drink, sat by the window, and stared at the sky, not looking for signs. Just letting myself feel. This wasn't about payback. It wasn't even about the vacation anymore. It was about me reclaiming space in my own story. For too long, I let them write my chapters. Let them set the terms. But not anymore. Now I hold the pen. And trust me, the next page is mine. I thought things might cool down after that. They didn't. By Monday morning, my post had over 300 likes, 140 comments, and a storm of direct messages. Most were kind. A few were confused. A handful were angry. Guess which ones came from my family? Uncle Marty wrote, "What you did was cruel. Your mother is heartbroken. You didn't need to make it public." Cousin Eva chimed in, "This could have been handled privately. You embarrassed them." I didn't reply. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't care about my side. They just didn't like that I stopped playing quietly. Typical. But amidst the noise, there were messages that made me pause. One from my high school teacher, Miss Collins. Saw your post. Took guts. I always knew you were stronger than you gave yourself credit for. Another from a college friend I hadn't talked to in years. My older brother always got everything too. Reading your post felt like reading my own thoughts. And then there was Jess. She'd lived across the street from us for 10 years. Our moms used to gossip over coffee like it was currency. She messaged, "Your mom used to talk about how proud she was of Eli, never mentioned you, not once." I always thought that was strange. I stared at that one longer than I should have, not because I was surprised, but because deep down, I had always known it was true. By midweek, the phone calls stopped. My parents must have realized I wasn't budging. But the silence didn't mean peace. Eli posted a photo from the airport on his Instagram, captioned, "Some people don't know how to be family. Sad." The comments were predictable. His friends, all siding with him. Some strangers joined in. Some cousins dropping vague comments like always two sides. He didn't tag me, but he didn't have to. I was the ghost in every word. That night, I sat with a glass of wine and started compiling. Not out of revenge, out of closure. A folder on my desktop, things left unsaid. Screenshots, voice memos, texts. All the moments I'd swallowed whole to keep the peace. Like the time I skipped my college graduation to stay home and babysit Eli because they wanted to go to Vegas. Or when I lent him $900 after he crashed his car and never saw a dime back. Or every time they bragged about him getting a job, only for him to quit within a month, while I quietly climbed the ladder in silence. I wasn't building a case, I was building perspective. Friday evening, I got a message from Aunt Vanessa again. She invited me to dinner. Just her wife Naomi, and a quiet table at a downtown bistro I loved. I almost said no, but something in me said, go. So I did. The moment I sat down, Vanessa didn't ask what happened. She didn't demand answers. She just looked me in the eye and said, "You did what they never expected. You chose yourself." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. Naomi passed me a glass of wine and said, Families like that don't change unless someone stops the cycle. We spent the next 2 hours not talking about them. Not really. We talked about travel, books, life. And by the time dessert came, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. That weekend, I began unfriending people, not out of spite, out of self-respect. Every cousin who sided with Eli without asking. Every friend who posted vague subtweets about loyalty or family first. Gone. Clean slate. I deleted the Facebook post too, not because I regretted it, but because it had done its job. People saw the truth. Now, I was ready to move on. Sunday morning, I got a text from Eli. I need to get my stuff from your place. That's it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a statement. I replied, your things are in the garage. Come when I'm not home. He didn't like that. Seriously? After everything you did, you can't even face me? I stared at the message for a long time. Then wrote, you can't face what you did. That's the difference. Blocked. I spent the afternoon boxing the rest of his junk. There wasn't much. Old hoodies, some tangled wires, a controller, 2 half-empty cologne bottles, a dusty pair of sneakers. I left them by the garage door, and I didn't think twice. Monday came. No one showed up. Tuesday, the bags were still there. Wednesday, gone. No note, no knock, just absence, which honestly suited me fine. Then something strange happened. One of Eli's friends, Aaron, messaged me. We'd never talked directly before. He wrote, hey, just wanted to say I saw everything. What they did was messed up. I used to think you were the weird quiet one. Turns out you were just surviving. I didn't reply, but I saved the message. Because truth like that, when it finally lands, it hits deep. By the end of the week, I felt different. I slept better. I laughed louder. I didn't flinch when the phone rang. The air in my apartment felt clearer, cleaner, free of guilt, free of begging for scraps of love dressed up as obligation. It's weird how you can be raised by people your whole life, share holidays and birthdays and last names, and yet never really be seen by them. And then one day you stand up. You say, no more. And suddenly, they see you, not as a son, not as a brother, but as a threat to the story they've been telling. Too bad. This is my story now, and I'm only just beginning. I didn't expect it to be this quiet. No knocks at my door, no new posts, no guilt-drenched voicemails, nothing. After years of chaos, this was foreign, peaceful, but in a strange, echoing way, like walking through your childhood home after it's been emptied. At first, I mistook it for loneliness, but it was something else. It was space to think, to breathe, to ask myself, who am I without them? I started running again, not for fitness, for freedom. Every morning before sunrise, I'd lace up and hit the pavement. The rhythm of my steps was therapy. My breath in, my passed out. One morning, about a mile from home, I passed a mother walking with her son. She was holding his hand, smiling at something he'd said. I didn't even know why it struck me, but it did. Not because it reminded me of my mother, it didn't, but because it reminded me of what I'd never had. And for the first time, I let myself feel it. Really feel it. I ran harder, fast enough to blur it all. That weekend, I got a letter, not an email, a physical letter, handwritten. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. It was from my father, just a single page folded neatly. It read, we've said a lot, or maybe not enough. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know we were wrong. I was wrong about how we treated you, about what we expected from you. You were always the one holding everything together, and we forgot to thank you. I hope someday we can talk. No pressure, just maybe. I read it twice, 3 times. It wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was closer than I'd ever gotten. I didn't know what to do with it, so I folded it back up, tucked it into a drawer, and left it there. Maybe someday. But not now. Around that same time, Eli unfollowed me on everything. Good. I didn't want to see his half-hearted selfies or vague posts about loyalty and family. What made it almost poetic was that I didn't care. Not out of bitterness. Out of growth. He could unfollow me all he wanted, but he couldn't undo what happened. He couldn't rewrite it. And he couldn't touch the version of me I was becoming. One night, I dreamed I was back at the airport. But this time, I was the one with the suitcase, not carrying anyone else's. Not buying someone else's ticket, just mine. In the dream, I looked around and realized I was alone, but it didn't feel scary. It felt powerful. I woke up smiling. Monday, I got coffee with Rachel again. She slid into the booth, dropped her bag, and said, "You look lighter?" "Lighter?" I asked. Like someone who finally let go of dead weight. I laughed, because it was true. We didn't talk about my parents, or Eli. We talked about art, travel, her new job, my new apartment. It felt good. Then she said, "You ever thought about going on that trip anyway?" "What trip?" "To Germany. The one you paid for." I blinked. I had buried that thought so deep, it startled me. "I mean," she continued, "you still have a passport, still have time off. You earned it. Why not?" That night, I looked up flights and hotels and tours. I didn't want to recreate the old plan. I wanted something new, something mine. I booked a one-way ticket, Berlin, 2 weeks. Solo, no itinerary, no obligations, just me. When I landed, it felt like stepping into another life. The city was alive, bustling, old and modern at the same time. I checked into a quiet Airbnb on a tree-lined street. Nothing fancy, just simple and warm. For the first 2 days, I wandered without a map. I ate currywurst from street vendors, sat in parks, watched strangers laugh in languages I didn't understand. And somewhere between a river cruise and a museum tour, I realized something profound. This was what peace felt like. It wasn't loud, it didn't come with fanfare. It came with quiet breakfasts and cobblestone walks, and the absence of people who made me question my worth. One evening, I found myself sitting at a cafe terrace, sipping strong coffee and journaling. A couple next to me asked where I was from. We talked about travel, family, distance. I told them a watered-down version of my story. The woman said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is leave the room when no one notices we're there. I swallowed hard, because that had been my life. In the room, paying for everything, carrying everyone, being the quiet background. And when I finally walked out, they didn't notice, not until they needed me again. On my last night in Berlin, I stood on a bridge over the Spree River. The sky was gold and lavender. The water below shimmered like a secret. And I whispered out loud, to no one and everyone, "I forgive you, but I won't return to you." Because I meant it. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want to be seen or heard or acknowledged. I wanted to be free. And I was. Back home, I hung a photo from the trip. Just one. A quiet canal. No people. No captions. Just stillness. That's what I chose. Not loud declarations. Not dramatic posts. Not cutting people out with scissors. But gently closing the door and locking it. Not out of spite. Out of survival. Coming back from Berlin, I felt like I'd left something behind. Not an object, but an old version of myself. The one that apologized for taking up space. The one who said it's okay when it wasn't. The one who financed guilt, called it love, and smiled through the sting. He didn't return with me. I came home alone, lighter, and I was finally ready to start living like it. The apartment looked different. Same walls, same furniture, but I saw it through new eyes now. It was my space. Mine. Not a storage unit for someone else's mess. I rearranged everything. Not because I needed to, but because I could. Sofa near the window. Desk facing east. A new lamp in the corner that made the room feel warm. It sounds silly, but even the silence felt friendlier now. A week passed. Then 2. I didn't hear from them. Not Mom, not Dad, not Eli. I figured maybe the message had finally landed. I was done. No more bailing them out. No more being the dependable one they could ditch and dial back when convenient. And honestly, I didn't miss them. That was the hardest truth to sit with. I loved them. I did. But I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The version of them I'd built in my head. The kind, proud, generous parents who'd never really existed. But the actual versions? The real ones? No, I didn't miss that. One Saturday afternoon, I got a message from Eli. "Can we meet? Just talk, no pressure." It came through a new number. Guess I hadn't blocked him on everything. At first, I ignored it. But something about it gnawed at me. Maybe because he never said that before. Just talk. No demands. No guilt. No backhanded jokes. Just that. We met at a public park. Neutral ground. He showed up in an old hoodie, hands buried in his pockets, eyes low. The usual swagger was gone. For once, Eli looked like someone who realized the world didn't revolve around him. "Hey," he said, barely above a whisper. I nodded. We sat on a bench near the duck pond. Quiet at first. Awkward. Then finally, he said, "I messed up. Not we. Not you misunderstood. Just I. I took something that wasn't mine. A trip you planned. A gift you saved for. I treated it like it was owed to me. I didn't say anything. I was selfish," he continued, "and lazy. You were always the one cleaning things up, and I guess I got used to that. I never even stopped to think about what it cost you." That part hit me. Not just the money, but the cost, the emotional toll, the resentment I swallowed, the pride I buried. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just wanted you to know I see it now." I stared ahead at the water. Kids were tossing bread at ducks. Couples walked by. Life continued. "Why now?" I asked finally. He looked at me. "Because when Mom and Dad realized you weren't coming back, they panicked. But me? I realized I didn't have anyone left to be better for." That was honest. Maybe the first truly honest thing I'd ever heard from him. "I'm going to therapy now," he added, trying to clean my act up. "I'm working too. Real job. Like hourly wages and everything." I smirked. Couldn't help it. "Not asking you to clap," he said with a small laugh. "Just letting you know." I nodded slowly. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. But for the first time, I saw possibility in his eyes, not just excuses. When we stood to leave, he didn't try to hug me. Just said, "Thanks for showing up," and walked away. A few days later, Rachel invited me to dinner at her place. She'd made lasagna, garlic bread, and poured me a glass of red that was way too fancy for a weeknight. We ate, talked about nothing and everything. Then she leaned back, grinned, and said, "You know you're glowing, right?" I raised an eyebrow. "Glowing?" "Yeah," she nodded. "Like someone who cut off dead weight and discovered their spine." I laughed. "Thanks. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me this year." "No, really," she said. "You're different now. Stronger. Softer, too." I tilted my head. "Softer? You used to be all tense, all defense, like you were bracing for impact every second. But now," she smiled, "now you're just here." That stuck with me all night. Because she was right. I'd stopped flinching, stopped waiting for the next task, the next betrayal, the next guilt trip. I was just here. I started doing things I used to postpone. Joined a local book club, signed up for photography classes, cooked for myself, like real meals, not just takeout or cereal. I even adopted a rescue cat, named him Atlas, because he looked like he'd carried too much on his tiny shoulders, just like me. He curled up beside me every night, purring like the world was finally right. And maybe it was. One rainy evening, I opened that drawer again, the one with Dad's letter. Read it a second time, then a third. It still hurts, but it didn't sting like before. And I realized something else. I didn't need their apology to move on. I didn't need their permission to heal. Closure wasn't a gift they could give me. It was something I had already given myself. That weekend, I went on a road trip. Solo. No destination. Just a tank full of gas and a playlist that made me feel 17 again. I stopped when I felt like it. Took photos of old barns, wildflowers, abandoned train tracks. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't curated. But it was mine. At one gas station, a stranger complimented my shirt. I thanked them and smiled. Not the polite, closed-off smile I used to wear. A real one. One that came from somewhere new. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my family. And here's the honest answer. I miss the version of them I needed. The version that was loved without conditions. That listened. That stayed. But I don't miss the real ones. Because the real ones took until I was dry. Now I'm finally watering my own roots. And I've never felt more alive. I didn't expect the final call to come from my mom. Not after all that had happened. Not after silence that stretched so long it began to feel permanent. But there it was, a number I hadn't saved. A voice I hadn't heard in months. "Hi, sweetheart." The word landed heavy, like a memory I hadn't unpacked in years. "Hi," I said, careful. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing. Then, "Do you have a minute?" I didn't, not really. But I said, "Yes." She told me they were home. That the trip to Germany never happened. Obviously. That they'd stayed in a cheap hotel near the airport, bickering and blaming each other. "Your father barely spoke," she said. "He's embarrassed." I didn't respond. "He knows we messed up," she added. "We both do." Silence. "I guess I just wanted to say," she paused again, "I'm sorry for everything." I leaned against the kitchen counter, unsure what to feel. I'd played this moment in my head 100 times, and yet it felt strange hearing it out loud. "I don't expect you to forgive us," she said softly. "I just needed to tell you. I needed to stop pretending we didn't hurt you." That part, it felt real. So I said, "Thank you." Not because it fixed anything, but because I could finally say it without bitterness. "Take care," I told her before we hung up. And just like that, the door didn't slam shut. It simply eased closed. I didn't tell Rachel right away. Didn't post about it. Didn't unpack it with Eli, even though he'd started texting me more frequently. It was mine. This little, weird, emotional moment of release. I carried it quietly, like a rock in my pocket that had somehow turned into a feather. Weeks passed. I kept living. Atlas, my rescue cat, grew bolder. He followed me from room to room now, meowing if I disappeared for more than a few minutes. I think we were both learning how to trust again. I started submitting my photography to local contests, even won a small one, a moody black and white photo of a cracked church window. The prize wasn't much, but the feeling? Unreal. Like I was finally becoming someone I liked. One morning, I found an envelope under my door. No name, no return address, just my apartment number written neatly in blue ink. Inside was a letter, handwritten. It was from Eli. I know I'm not owed anything, but I'm still writing because for the first time, I want to earn something. You were right, I was spoiled, lazy, entitled. I blamed everyone for everything and took credit for nothing. I didn't even realize how badly I hurt you until I saw that Facebook post. Not because of the embarrassment, but because I finally understood how invisible I'd made you feel. And then I realized something worse. I'd been taught to be that way, by them, and by watching how they treated you. I'm trying to break that cycle. Slowly, clumsily. But I'm trying. I know that might not mean much. But it's the truth. I hope you're well, Eli. I didn't cry. But I sat with the letter for a long time, reading it over, then again, because even though the pain hadn't disappeared, it had shape now, and names, and maybe even a chance at change. Spring came. My window stayed open more often. The air smelled like new grass and possibility. Rachel and I planned a sibling-free barbecue at her place. She grilled. I brought dessert. We talked about traveling, about Iceland, about what it would mean to take a trip that no one else tried to hijack. She paused, looked at me, and said, "You should go." "Where?" I asked. "Anywhere," she smiled. "You've been living for everyone else your whole life. Now go live for you." That night, I booked a flight. Nowhere fancy. Just a cabin in Oregon, mountains, forest, peace. I didn't tell anyone. Just packed light, took my camera, and left. The first morning there, I walked until my legs ached. Sat on a moss-covered rock overlooking a valley. Atlas wasn't with me, obviously, but I imagined he'd approve. I pulled out my journal, something I hadn't touched in over a year, and started writing. Not about them, not about trauma or repair or revenge, but about the sound of wind through pine needles, about the way light broke through fog like soft fingers, about the peace that came from solitude chosen, not forced. I wrote until my hand cramped, and I realized I was smiling. By the end of the trip, I'd filled 20 pages. I took hundreds of photos, some good, some blurry, some just for me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't think once about how they'd react. Didn't wonder if it would make them proud or ashamed. It was just mine, my eyes, my experience, my life. When I came back, things were quiet. The best kind of quiet. Eli messaged again, asking if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I said yes, not because I'd forgotten, but because I believed people could grow if they worked at it. When we met, he didn't bring excuses. He brought a notebook. I started journaling, he said sheepishly. Like you used to. I smiled. Good. He didn't push, didn't ask for anything, just listened. Maybe he really had changed. Maybe we both had. So where does that leave me? Here, right here, in an apartment that's finally mine, with a cat that follows me like a shadow, with friends who show up, with a family I'm cautiously rebuilding, and a self I'm finally starting to love. It's not a fairy tale, it's not perfect, but it's real. And after everything, that's all I ever wanted. Thank you for reading my story. Now tell me, if you were me, would you have done the same? Or do you think I went too far? Either way, I finally know who I am, and I'm never handing that over again. Story 2, get your belongings together and go. Without flinching, my mother explained, you left me because of a falsehood. During my success event, I reminded them. What I would do next surprised them. I never thought this day would come. In 1,000 lives, no way. I'm 32 years old now, and I can finally enjoy the accomplishments I've worked so hard to attain. However, that doesn't change the fact that 8 years ago, my parents evicted me from their house because of a false claim, a false narrative, a malevolent lie concocted by my sister, and they took it as true without question. In retrospect, the events still seem unbelievable. By the way, my name is Ryan. I've had a knack for business since I was little. My parents never recognized it, though. They were constantly focused on Laura, my older sister. She was their delight and pride, the person they believed could achieve great things. In the meantime, I was continuously ignored, brushed aside, or charged of being too sentimental. I was never close to Laura. She actually didn't like me. That may have been normal sibling rivalry, but this was something else entirely. In every sense of the word, Laura was self-centered, even if it meant disseminating false information about me or undermining my efforts and my parents. She would stop at nothing to preserve her reputation. They didn't think twice about falling for it. They constantly praised her little accomplishments and blamed me for things that, in their opinion, I had nothing to do with. Vulnerability was an indication of failure. It was not accepted to be weak. They held fast to a false sense of perfection, and everything that challenged it was viewed as dangerous. The turning point occurred when I was 22 years old. I was just starting out in the corporate sector at the time. Despite my lack of cash, I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do with my life. I was motivated to start my own business. So I worked a day job and spent my nights working on a side project. Although it wasn't glitzy, it was a positive move. That being said, Laura was a total disaster. She was still residing in the house our parents had bought her, had left college, and had worked at a number of pointless jobs. They paid for all of her bills, rent, and auto insurance. Nevertheless, she continued to find fault. Back then, I lived with my parents to save money while concentrating on my company, not because I was dependent on them. I never took advantage of their assistance the way Laura did. Instead, I paid for whatever I could. She didn't care about any of that, though. She hated the idea that I would receive any kind of recognition. She then started making unfounded charges. As usual, I can still clearly recall the night everything fell apart. My parents had a dinner party at the house while I was working late. I didn't attend these events, and I didn't mind. Even though I had other things to do, I heard my name called out as I went to the kitchen to get a snack. My mother was talking to Laura. Jealousy and malice permeated her voice. Bitterly, she remarked, I don't understand why we keep letting him stay here. He's wasting his life doing nothing at all day long, squandering time on that absurd computer. Most likely, he's just waiting for you to die so he can have it all. I stood still. I couldn't force myself to move, but I hadn't intended to listen in. What exactly was she discussing? Then she took it one step farther. Even if he has been taking from you, I wouldn't be shocked. She went on, I once witnessed him stealing cash from your wallet. I didn't want to come across as dramatic, so I kept quiet until now, but I think you should know that he has been embezzling your money. My chest constricted, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. I stood there. I had never done anything that she was accusing me of. I took pride in my independence and had worked tirelessly for years to build something from the ground up. But Laura didn't think twice about making up a whole lie to destroy me. My own mother didn't even question it, which was the most agonizing aspect. She didn't request evidence. She didn't stand up for me. She just muttered instead. I sensed that something wasn't quite right. I have a suspicion that he has been exploiting us. You might be correct. My stomach felt as though someone had struck it with a fist. How could they have trusted her rather than me? Why would they choose to believe the one person who had always resented me? I had always been aware that they favored Laura, but this was beyond anything I had ever imagined. The most painful part was that I wasn't even given a chance to defend myself. Her accusations stood against my denial, and I already knew I had no chance of winning. The following morning, everything reached its peak. As I got downstairs, I saw my parents positioned in the living room, their expressions devoid of warmth, just like they always looked when they were about to deliver something serious. "Ryan," my father began, his voice hard, "we need to discuss something." A heavy sensation crept in my gut, but I did my best to stay composed. "What is this about?" I inquired. "We've talked things over," my mother stated, her tone cold, "and we've made a decision. We don't feel it's proper for you to be here any longer." My brain absolutely shut off. I couldn't even begin to absorb the words I was hearing. "What precisely do you mean?" I eventually managed to say, "You're a grown-up now, Ryan," my father added, his arms folding across his chest. "It's time for you to take command of your own life. We are unable to continue supporting you as you are not making any significant improvement. You need to move out now." I was in complete shock as I stood there. Unable to come up with the correct words to reply, my heart pounded against my ribs. Although I had been residing in their home, I had never caused them any trouble. In an attempt to create something of my own, I had been working tirelessly. As if I were a mere annoyance, they were now throwing me away. I turned to look at Laura, who was grinning triumphantly in the background. She didn't have to say anything. I knew beforehand that she had planned it all. This had been started by her. "This is so unjust, Mom and Dad." With a quivering voice, I spoke. "Are you truly going to believe her more than I do? She is fabricating. Nothing has been taken from you by me. I've been putting forth endless effort to safeguard my future. However, they showed little interest in listening to me. They had already made up their minds. You must go." In a tone that was icy and unyielding, my father said, "Get your things together and leave." For an instant, I just stared at them, transfixed. Everything I had invested time and effort into seemed to have been torn away in a second. I had no house, no support, nothing. There is nowhere to go. I left their house that day feeling more alone than I had ever felt. However, I also silently committed to myself. I would disprove them. I would demonstrate my abilities to them. And when I was successful, they would be sorry for all the decisions they had taken. I reached my lowest point after getting evicted. I had nowhere to stay that was secure. No one to rely on, no safety net. However, I didn't let it to ruin me. With nothing left to lose, they were determined to live. I exerted more effort than ever before. I spent many months sitting on a friend's couch, working on my company concept whenever I had free time. It was a never-ending loop of restless nights, protracted weekends, and recurring failures. Then, however, everything was different. I had been working on a specialized product-focused internet business that I thought had promise. It was slow at first, barely making ends meet, but I continued improving my strategy. I invested all of the money I made from temporary work back into the company. Then, one crucial event changed everything. I will always remember the moment I knew I was headed in the correct direction. My sales soared in a matter of hours after a social media campaign I made went viral. People hadn't known they wanted the product until they saw it, and all of a sudden I had more orders than I could handle by myself. In order to meet demand, I had to bring in additional workers. After that, everything changed as a result of building the proper relationships, working with the right people, and creating a brand that truly connected with customers. I created something tangible. This was no accident. It was the result of unwavering commitment and a refusal to give up. Even after I had been abandoned by my own family. By my 26th birthday, my company had accomplished a noteworthy milestone. I was making six figures every year. I was now living in a cozy apartment, distant from the poisonous environment of my parents' house, and my business was growing quickly. It was something I had made myself. I got back in touch with a number of old pals who had always supported me during that time. They were more than willing to help, and I made sure to be among positive individuals instead of negative ones. I stayed committed, honing my tactics and growing my company. By the time I was 30, I had achieved a degree of accomplishment that was unthinkable when I was expelled. I was financially secure, had a strong brand, and several sources of income, which allowed me to live my life as I saw fit. I made stock market investments, bought my first house, and thought about how I might support the success of others. It was unimaginable to see my name on industry rankings, get invited to speak at events, and have complete control over my destiny. However, if my parents hadn't evicted me, none of it would have been feasible. The animosity and hate turned into the fuel that propelled me ahead. Each time I remembered how they rejected me, it made me more determined. Their rejection motivated me to keep going. I needed to prove something to myself as much as to them. My parents' attempts to get back in touch increased along with my accomplishments. It began with discreet calls and texts asking how I was doing. I disregarded them at first. I had no plans to reintegrate them into my life without holding them accountable, and they had never shown regret. They then started to be more direct, attending my functions and unexpectedly visiting my house. On my birthday, my mom sent me flowers. My father sent me an email expressing their admiration for my accomplishments. It was too much. They refused to admit how they had abandoned me, but they wanted to be linked to my achievement, as though the years of desertion had never occurred. As I turned a corner at a networking event, everything came to a head. They were standing there grinning as though nothing had gone wrong when I discovered them. However, I could see the despair in their eyes through their performance. They want forgiveness in order to forget the past and act as though it had never occurred. They paused, then took a step forward. My dad held out his hand. My mom smiled apprehensively. "It's great to see you, Ryan," my dad said. "We have been keeping up with your adventure. We're quite pleased with you." I inhaled steadily. Now I'm proud of myself. My mother came forth after everything. "We want to put things right, Ryan, even though we acknowledge our faults. We wish to re-enter your life." Torn between control and rage, I stared at them. I had a more ambitious objective. I said it again. "You want to make things right. Do you wish to re-enter my life?" "Absolutely." "Quickly," my mother urged. "Ryan, you have always been important to us. We simply know." I interrupted, holding out a hand. "You didn't always give a damn. You believed a lie, therefore you tossed me out." My life was ruined by a lie my sister uttered. Now that I've constructed something significant, you can't just show up again. There was silence between us. Their features began to show signs of guilt, but they refused to accept complete responsibility. They had no real regrets. All they wanted to do was match my accomplishments. My dad, his shaky voice attempted to change the subject. "We apologize, Ryan. All we did was what we believed was best for you. However, we now know what was best for me," I interrupted. Laura said, "You left me because you lied. You also didn't question it. You trusted her more than your own son. Can you possibly imagine what it was like to be alone? To have total solitude? Today, I battled for all I own. And you can't just show up today and act like nothing's wrong. Not without acknowledging your actions." I saw it for the first time. Their faces' embarrassment. At last, the truth of what they had done was beginning to set in. However, it was insufficient. "Not quite yet. I wasn't done when my mother opened her mouth," I said. "And let's be clear. I will not forget the past. This isn't a sentimental reunion. It will take more than just attending my events and telling me, 'We're proud of you,' if you truly want to put things right. It's not that simple for you to come back into my life. Not without taking the fallout." They moved apprehensively. Their fake grins were disappearing, and I saw something real for the first time in years. Sincere regret. However, I wasn't prepared to let them go so lightly. My mother started crying, but I wouldn't console her. They endured the years of quiet and the distance after all. I resisted feeling sorry for them. They had betrayed my confidence, and that couldn't be undone by any amount of tears. My mother's voice trembled as she said, "I know you're hurting, Ryan. We made a bad decision. All I want is for things to be fixed. It cannot be simply fixed. I lost my temper. Not so simple. The last 8 years cannot be undone. You cannot pretend that you have never abandoned me. When I most needed you, just because I've succeeded doesn't mean you can walk in and assume everything will be all right. My father appeared to want to talk, but I refused to listen. No, I said firmly. You will never fully understand the gravity of what you did, no matter how much you apologize. When I'm ready to forgive is not up to you. They appeared defeated and stood motionless for a moment. I wasn't finished yet, though. Do you wish to correct the situation? I asked icily. You wish to demonstrate your sincere apologies? All right, let me give you a chance. A sincere one, but only if you can demonstrate to me that you recognize the hurt you have caused. My parents looked at each other nervously. My father started to speak, but I stopped him with a raised hand. I went on to say, first, you're going to publicly apologize, not just make some evasive, half-hearted statement. You'll acknowledge your actions, how you abandoned me when I most needed you, and how you decided to believe a lie rather than have faith in your son. My mom's face went white. I'm not sure if you have the authority to determine what is excessive, Ryan. Sharply, I said. For years, I bore the weight of your choices. Accepting responsibility is the first step towards making amends. You'll be honest with my friends and offer an apology. The ones who stood by me when you wouldn't. An unbearable silence followed. I saw the hesitation in their eyes, but they knew I was serious. If they wanted back into my life, they had to prove they had changed. And another thing, I added, my voice hardening, you'll also take accountability for what happened with my sister. You'll admit she was the one who lied that you let her tear this family apart. You'll tell everyone the truth. Not just about me, but about how she manipulated you. The mention of my sister made them flinch. I saw them exchange a look, but I wasn't done. After you do all of that, I said, then and only then will I consider allowing you back into my life. But don't think I'll forget everything. You'll have to convince me this isn't just about my success, that you truly understand the wound you caused. I saw the battle on their faces, torn between resisting or surrendering. But I had the power now, and I wasn't about to give it up. At last my father spoke, his voice low and unsure. Ryan, we didn't realize. We thought you were just making bad choices. We didn't see how much you were suffering. I shook my head. You didn't see because you didn't care. I said coldly. You never cared enough to ask the right questions. Never cared enough to search for the truth. And I'll never forget that. My mother stepped closer, her hands shaking. Please, Ryan, she pleaded. We know we messed up. We're so sorry. We just want to fix this. Please don't cut us out forever. I inhaled deeply, forcing myself to stay composed. The fury threatened to erupt again, but I kept it under control. This wasn't about winning. It was about making them understand the weight of their actions. Do you wish to correct the situation? I asked, leaning forward. Then prove it. Show me. You can take responsibility. Until then, don't expect me to let you back in. I'm not a backup plan. You'll have to live with what you did. At that moment, I spun around and walked away, leaving my parents frozen in silence. Their voices called out, but I didn't turn back. As I stepped out, a mix of triumph and fury settled in me. I felt victorious, finally reclaiming my voice, but rage still boiled within me. How could they reappear? As if nothing had happened? I wasn't ready to let go of my anger, but I was ready to make them fight for my forgiveness. For days there was stillness. I knew they were battling with the embarrassment. Caught off surprise by the repercussions I had placed upon them. They would hesitate, trying to dodge culpability. But I wouldn't allow them. This wasn't a game. It was their one chance to indicate they realized the devastation they had done. Then my mother stretched out not to see me. Just a phone call. Her wobbly voice told me they had spent time debating it. We've considered everything, Ryan, she muttered. We understand what you're asking, and we'll do it. We'll set things right. A frigid sense of justice descended over me. They didn't get to stroll back into my life with a simple apology. They had to establish their sorrow. I want to make a remark in public. I post it on social media. I leave my remarks hanging no matter what platform you utilize. You'll acknowledge that you choose to believe a falsehood. Instead, have faith in your own son, that you left me when I most needed you. You'll also see to it that everyone sees it. There was silence between us. I could hear her attempting to regain her composure, maybe in an attempt to bargain. However, I wasn't willing to make concessions. I want the facts to be known, I pushed. I want everyone who was duped by you to see it. Our family members and friends, everyone. A lengthy, tired sigh. Give up. All right, Ryan, she responded at last. We'll be honest with everyone. She paused. But will you think about continuing after this? I took a breath, remembering the years of quiet pain and humiliation. They were the same. Not quite yet. No, I responded icily. I'll give it some thought until you follow through. I'm ending all correspondence. There was silence, then a faint murmur. I get it. I didn't answer. Nothing else could be said. They had to deal with the repercussions. My parents followed through a few days later. They were quite clear in their social media admissions, leaving no opportunity for misunderstanding. In a long statement accompanied by an old photo of me, my mother acknowledged that they had expelled me because of my sister's deception. They opted to trust her, she said, even though they knew something was wrong. She apologized for failing me and abandoning me when I most needed them. She acknowledged that they now realized the consequences of their actions and expressed regret for the suffering they had caused. Although it was shorter and less sentimental, my father's comment made the same point. He acknowledged that he had not paid attention. Never take my viewpoint into consideration and assume the worst. He hoped that one day I would forgive him even though he knew it was too late to repair the damage. Everyone could hear what they had to say. The ones who had never sought my support and who had passed judgment on me. The truth was ultimately revealed to them. Did it, however, provide me closure? Not at all. I was aware that my accomplishment was the sole reason they did this. They weren't really sorry for me. They belonged to them, a move to alleviate their guilt. They wanted to think that the past might be changed by a public confession. However, they could no longer control me. I never answered. No acknowledgement, no communications. Because I would have to give up my position if I engaged. In actuality, I was no longer in need of them. They had no place in the life I had created. I had demonstrated my ability to move on and come to terms with the fact that some relationships are best left in the past. I skipped over their post when I noticed they had tagged me. I didn't require their approval. I was already victorious. Silence fell for weeks. Then my mom sent me a message. A brief text, "You are missed." By that point, however, it was irrelevant. Years of negligence could not be reversed. The injuries they had caused, how quickly they had deserted me over a falsehood, was something I couldn't change. I never answered, and that was where it ended. So read it. Maybe I sound unyielding, but did I handle this correctly? Some say I should have forgiven them. That family comes first, but I can't shake the sensation. They only reappeared due of my successes. They didn't care back then, so why should I care now? I've moved on. But is I wrong for clinging on to this resentment? I'd love to hear your views. Story 3. You can't purchase reverence. My dad grinned. You know what? I said, you're on your own now. The automobile was gone by sunrise. They were angry because the invoices were past due. I never imagined that I would break off all contact with my own parents. After all, they are still your family, regardless of how much you may disagree with them. I used to believe that. But sometimes the most painful injuries can come from people closest to you. In my situation, my parents did more than simply hurt me. They used the kindness I showed, distorted my achievements into something incomprehensible, and twisted my sympathy. I'm 32 years old, and my name is Jason. I was up in a culture that did not readily provide respect. There were restrictions attached. Love had to be earned, according to my parents, especially my father. When I was a kid, that meant getting perfect grades, being a great athlete, and doing whatever chores that were given to me without complaining. They would quickly remind me that I was lucky to have a place to live if I made even the slightest mistake. Most parents acknowledge their child's efforts, but mine viewed me as a resource. They boasted to others about my achievements, but they never gave me a personal acknowledgement. Any praise I got was entirely in relation to my thoughts about them. They touted it as their achievement if I won an event at school. They assured everyone that their constant pressure was the reason I received a scholarship. Even a single "we're proud of you" would have meant the world to me, even though I never expected to be showered with love. Nancy, my younger sister, was raised quite differently. The one who could do no wrong, she was the favorite. She received boundless love, while I had to fight for every shred of approval, without exertion. She was pampered by my parents, protected her from accountability, and made every effort to keep her comfortable. They saw to it that she received what she wanted. By the time I started high school, I had already accepted my position as the family's worker, even if it meant paying a price. There was no option to take on more responsibilities. They were just given to me. I got my first job when I was 18 with the hopes of saving money for a vehicle. But as soon as my mother found out I was making money, she started having a lot of unexpected expenses that needed my help. "You don't have to pay rent to stay here," she would remark. "It's only right that you lend a hand." Nancy, of course, was never supposed to put in a dime. I pushed myself because I was anxious to get out, not just because I had nowhere else to go. I worked tirelessly to protect my future, graduated from high school at the top of my class, and was awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious institution. My parents continued to make me feel bad in spite of this. They pretended that I had left them when I moved out. They would remind me of what they had allegedly given up for me if I didn't come often. In actuality, though, they had never sacrificed anything for me. I had always been the one who sacrificed for them, if anything. Finally, after years of hardship, I achieved financial security. I made smart investments, got a well-paying job, and experienced true stability for the first time. A part of me still yearned for their acceptance, though, in spite of everything. I thought they would eventually see me differently if I showed them how successful I was. I made the foolish decision to give back. I began off little, occasionally sending them money when they said they were having financial difficulties. But no matter how much I contributed, it was never sufficient. Even though they led a comfortable life, my mother would phone and lament their financial struggles. My father would make subtle allusions to how a true man provides for Nancy and his family. She didn't mind asking me directly to pay for her costs. Then the greatest sacrifice of all was made. For years, my parents had been griping about their mortgage. Their monthly payments were ridiculously high since they had refinanced so frequently. I made a big choice since I knew they would never be able to pay it off. Every single dime of their mortgage was paid off by me. I was certain that this would be the pivotal moment, the time when they would at last say thank you, Jason, and show their appreciation. "We are grateful for all of your efforts." However, that time never came. Rather, my father hardly recognized it, as if he had been expecting it from me from the beginning. "It was time for someone in the family to do something constructive," my mother said. I still wasn't prepared to give up hope, though. Perhaps they simply didn't know how to express gratitude. Perhaps they needed time to think it over. So I went on. I provided all of the funding for their ideal trip across Europe. I thought this would be the perfect gift because my father was fascinated by history and my mother had always wanted to travel to Paris. I wanted, for once, to see them truly happy as a result of anything I had done. I expected an enthusiastic discussion about their experiences when they got back. Instead, my mother said, "Next time, make sure to book us first class." As soon as she saw me, at that point, everything began to make sense to me. My kindness wasn't helping us get along. They were just becoming more entitled as a result. They weren't just ungrateful. They had started acting as though I were just a limitless supply of cash. I was already feeling worn out as Thanksgiving drew near. Nevertheless, I told myself I could handle it. It was just one night. A few backhanded remarks and a few passive-aggressive punches were acceptable to me. I didn't realize how much worse things would get, but it felt like a tiny price to keep things peaceful. At first, everything appeared to be all right as I entered my parents' front door that evening. The home was filled with the delicious scent of turkey. I sat down, said hello to everyone, and braced myself for the typical family chaos. Then, as we started to eat, his trademark smug smile steered the conversation in an unexpected direction. "So, Jason, how does it feel to toss money around and assume that will earn you any respect?" my father remarked, leaning back in his chair. For a minute, I froze. The room was silent. Then, with a scarcely audible giggle, my mother spoke. Nancy didn't even look at me. She was still engrossed to her phone. I tried to make light of the situation by forcing myself to chuckle. "What are you discussing?" I inquired. My dad drank his drink nonchalantly. You believe you're important because you've paid off your house and taken trips, but you can't buy respect and, to be honest, you haven't earned it. Something snapped inside of me at that very instant. I had sacrificed for these individuals for years, giving them all they asked for and more. And their answer was this: not only a lack of appreciation, but complete humiliation. My heart was thumping in my ears as I gritted my teeth. But it wasn't even his words that hurt the most. It was the way he pronounced them, so casually dismissive, as though I were just a little kid in need of approval. I put down my fork carefully, I whispered, maintaining a steady tone. My dad raised an eyebrow. What's so funny? I made eye contact with him and let the tiniest grin show. You'll discover. I made a decision that would alter everything at that precise moment, yet I remained silent. Not quite yet. I just kept eating if nothing had occurred, while carefully planning my next move. They were unaware that their lives will soon change in a way they never anticipated. And I wouldn't be the one cleaning up the pieces this time. I sat in total quiet for the rest of Thanksgiving dinner. My mother periodically made arrogant remarks. My father continued talking, and Nancy remained glued to her phone as if nothing had happened. But throughout the entirety of my life, I was already psychologically far ahead of them. I had complied with their regulations, worked nonstop, and given generously in the hopes that they would eventually view me as more than simply a personal bank account. However, I was able to see things for what they really were tonight. Nothing was going to change. They wouldn't. So I was done. I pulled my chair back, cleared my plate, and stood up. Well, I answered, trying to smile politely. This was fascinating. I'm supposed to be leaving. Nancy hardly gave me a look. My father reacted, but my mother did not. He grinned as if he had triumphed, as though he thought I was walking away defeated, licking my injuries. I didn't say anything else. No ranting of emotions, avoid conflict. I just picked up my coat, went out the door, and left them to their own little world. That's when I started working on my strategy. I went straight to my bank account as soon as I got home. I went over all of the automated transactions I had set up for them, including their internet subscription and utility bills. My mother argued that even that absurd streaming service was essential. I fired each and every one. Then I took it a step farther. I'm no longer liable for their property taxes. The house insurance ended. My saved money for repairs was totally depleted. I had managed every financial issue for them for many years, making sure they never had to do a thing. They were going to see firsthand what it was like to live without my help. I wasn't going to stop there, though. I went into my messages and scrolled to find Nancy's number. I had been managing her credit obligations for years, but I had never told her directly. I discreetly handled her negative balances month after month, making sure she never had to bear the consequences of her careless expenditures. I went to the internet site of her bank and removed my name from her upcoming payments. The last step followed. In an attempt to be helpful, I had co-signed my parents' auto loan 2 years prior. The installments were taken out of their bank account, even though the ownership was in my name. I had been quietly restocking without anyone knowing. I called the bank and asked that the automobile be returned in less than an hour. After undoing everything, I just waited. At 6:45 a.m., the first missed call was seen. At 6:47, another came. There were 140 missed calls when I looked at my phone. I was able to infer the contents of the voicemails without ever listening to them. I could see it well. As he sipped his morning coffee, my father got up for the day. When I stepped outside, the driveway was deserted. When my mother reached for the TV remote, she found that their connection was broken. For the first time in her life, Nancy swiped her card at a posh store and it was declined. I smiled because I could almost feel their terror building. My phone then vibrated again. I didn't respond to it. Once more, it rang. Then again, I finally answered, but I just waited without saying anything. Through the speaker came the high-pitched voice of my mother. "Have you done anything?" I leaned back on my cushions, completely calm. "Mom, good morning. Do you not?" "Good morning." "Me?" "The vehicle has vanished. Our costs are not being met. Our energy company just told us that they will cut off our power if we don't pay the remaining amount by today." "What's going on?" I pretended to think. "That's not common? Strange?" She screamed. "This has to be fixed right now. I let out a long, hoarse sigh. You know, Mom, I was thinking about what Dad said last night about how showing off riches doesn't garner respect. And to be honest, he's absolutely correct. As a result, I have decided to stop distributing riches. Quiet. Then my father's angry voice cut through. Jason, enough of these games. Now restore everything. I laughed honestly and completely. No, what do you mean? They were unable to notice my shrug. That's precisely what I mean. No, I'm done. I'll just cease contributing if you think I'm such an idiot for doing so. Did you wish to impart any knowledge to me? Okay, I learnt my lesson. You ungrateful, self-centered little one. I hung up. I then turned my phone off. For the remainder of the day, I didn't check my messages. I didn't have to. I was previously familiar with their contents. More manipulation, more shouting, perhaps even a few hesitant apologies. This time, though, I wasn't buying into it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one in a hurry to fix the problem. And I was the one who saw them fall. And that was really, really thrilling, to be honest. It wasn't until the next morning that I turned my phone back on. I did the second time. Unanswered calls, voicemails, innumerable texts my mother had sent, and long messages that alternated between vehement accusations and fervent entreaties flooded my inbox. Despite their briefness, my father's texts were rife with demands. As was to be expected, Nancy had only sent one message. Jason, what the devil is wrong with you? I glanced through them slowly, not caring that their desperation was growing even more rapidly than I had expected. Then my phone rang again, just like clockwork. I didn't pay attention to it, Mom. Then it rang once more, and once more. I finally let out a breath and answered the phone. Jason. My mother's voice was strained, shaking even as she tried to remain composed. This has to be fixed right now. Good morning, Mother, I said, reclined in my chair. How are things going? Her tone hardened as she yelled, Don't play dumb. The wireless network has been cut off. The electric company has recently threatened to turn off the electricity if we don't pay the bill within a day. Additionally, your father had to use public transit. Jason, the bus. Can you imagine how humiliating it must have been for him? It nearly made me chuckle. Oh no, how awful. You mean what ordinary people do on a daily basis? This isn't funny, she fired back. You cannot simply cease paying our bills and abandon us in this predicament. Now, what precisely are we going to do? Uncertain, Mom, I leaned forward. Maybe I'm not sure. Obtain a job? Perhaps, just perhaps, begin to take responsibility for your own life. She took a short breath and interrupted herself as she continued. She spoke in a quieter, more measured tone. We are your family, Jason. You cannot just ignore the folks who brought you up. That's interesting, I thought, because last night I felt like a complete idiot who thought that money equated to respect. Dad said that, didn't he? She paused. Then she could, with a heightened sweetness that made my skin crawl. You know your father didn't mean that, sweetie. No, he didn't. I tilted my head in question. Why, therefore, didn't he make an effort to apologize? Quiet. I waited. Nothing has changed. I grinned. I had the exact same notion. Mom, I hope you have an amazing day. The phone continued to ring even after I hung up. The messages also did. Their texts grew more desperate over the course of the following several days. My mom would go on long, guilt-ridden tirades about how I was leaving them. Nancy alternates between being unconcerned and asking that I help her with her money, while my father alternates between being aggressive and remaining silent. But I didn't back down. Then they showed up at my house exactly 7 days later. My mother followed as my father pushed his way inside as soon as I opened the door. Nancy, who appeared more irritated than anything else, stayed farther back with her arms crossed. What on earth is the matter with you? My dad snarled, towering over me. Do you really believe that you can simply interrupt us in this manner? I folded my arms and stepped back. Yes, you self-centered little one, I do. My mom stopped him by grabbing his arm. Jason, she replied, her voice brimming with fake friendliness. All we need to do as a family is talk about it. We're family now, huh? I raised an eyebrow in question. Because I was just a fool spouting money about last week, wasn't I? She gave a quick breath. Your father didn't mean it, I told you. Perhaps he ought to have stated it himself. For a brief time, I believed my father may actually strike at me as his hands clenched. His nostrils flared in exasperation as he took a quick breath. All right, he clenched his teeth. I may have been a bit too severe, but that doesn't excuse this. This isn't how you just leave your folks, I sneered. Forsaken? Do you mean how you told me to get my act together and tossed me out when I was 18? Or perhaps the fact that I worked 2 jobs while you wouldn't provide the least assistance? Or what about when I eventually achieved success and you merely made the demand for more? Nancy let out a loud moan. God, we understand. It was difficult for you. Oh no. Could we skip ahead to the point when you've already fixed everything? Stunned, I turned to her. Fix everything? She gave an eye roll. Yes, Jason just restored everything to its original state. It's not that complex, for heaven's sake. I glanced at my parents, then at her. They didn't appear remorseful. None of them appeared to understand their actions. They had no intention of making apologies. They had no intention of apologizing. They needed me, which is why they were here. For the first time in their lives, they were truly being held accountable. They were unable to tolerate it. I inhaled deeply and slowly before meeting their gaze. No, I answered firmly. My dad's mouth tightened. My mom's face dropped. Nancy laughed. Dad stepped forward. I won't repeat myself, and I won't tell you again, Jason. I cut you off. No, I'm done. Earn money if you need it. In order for your bills to be paid, take care of them yourself. I will no longer serve as your personal pocketbook. Anger distorted my mother's face. You were reared by us. You owe us. I laughed without humor. I was reared by you. I moved in closer. My voice fell to a frozen silence. At 18, you kicked me out. You disregarded me when I was having trouble. For years, you did nothing at all as you watched me break my back. I know absolutely nothing about you. For the first time, they didn't say a thing. I gave them one more look before moving to the door and opening it. My father remained silent, despite his nostrils flaring and his hands tightened into fists. Frustrated, he pushed the door and rushed by me. Nancy tossed her hair back and moaned. She followed him, muttering, "You're being ridiculous." My mom paused, her mouth opening as though she wanted to say something. She just let out a breath and left when I didn't respond. I closed the door, locked it, and felt free for the first time in my life. I thought they had given up at first. No more guilt tripping, no more texts, no more calls. At first, the silence seemed strange, but after years of financial exploitation and emotional coercion, I embraced it. My phone wasn't clamoring for my attention all the time for once. I wasn't their personal bank for once. I had freedom. I thought so. Aunt Emily phoned 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. We had never had a close relationship. She served as the family's mediator and always defended my parents' behavior. I thus understood why she was calling when her name showed up on my screen. She let out a big sigh as soon as I responded. You must put this right, Jason. I was aware of what was about to happen. Create what? Correct? I answered in an uninterested tone. Your mom is inconsolable. Your dad is overburdened. They don't know how they'll get by. Is this fair, in your opinion? My patient snapped. They took advantage of me for years. They publicly humiliated me as soon as I established a limit. They now want me to continue supporting their way of life as if nothing had occurred. She argued that they were still your parents. Family is family. I gave a chilly laugh. It's funny. When they left me when I was 18, they didn't appear to care about family. Where had this worry been at the time? Quiet. It was not what she had anticipated. She paused for a long moment, then sighed. Look, I know they're not flawless, but you have a solid financial situation. You can help them. You're merely observing as they struggle. Yes, I said without thinking. Her voice became piercing. It's callous of you. The way they treated me is precisely how I'm treating them. One more pause. Then there was a condescending tone in her voice. All right. At least talk to them if you don't want to give them money. Act like the grown-up. I chuckled. Why do I have to be the larger person every time? Why must I forgive them when they keep taking? She gave a frustrated sigh. You are acting irrationally. You'll regret this one day. No, I won't. I hung up. The first indication that they weren't done with me was that 2 days later, the second one arrived. I discovered 47 missed calls and a deluge of messages from Nancy, my parents, and distant family members I hadn't spoken to in years when I woke up. They conveyed anything from feigned care to downright animosity. Mom, please, Jason. We must speak. My dad, your point has been made. Now accept responsibility and behave like a man. Nancy, whoa. To make a point, you're actually letting mom and dad struggle? You are abhorrent. I received a message from a distant relative I hadn't spoken to since I was a kid. I'm not sure what's going on, but you have to solve this, dude. Family comes first. Then came the message that really enraged me. Mom wrote, "For you, we gave up everything. We reared you and gave you life. And you pay us back like this? Leaving us when we most need you. It looks like we might lose everything. And you are solely to blame. I hope that's something you can live with." My palm was shaking with anger as I gazed at the screen. I'm to blame. They lacked a sense of financial responsibility, reserves, and a backup plan. Nevertheless, I had to clean up their mess somehow. After all this, following years of deceit, privilege, and humiliation, no, I'm not going to be tricked again. I didn't pay attention to the message. The calls continued to pour in. The tone of the writing became more antagonistic. Then my doorbell rang after a week of stillness. I looked at the camera. My folks. I didn't respond. Time and time again they rang. Then the pounding began. "Hey, Jason! Let's get this door open!" My dad screamed, his voice roiling with rage. My pulse was pounding as I sat still on the couch and gazed at the door. Then came the artificially sweet voice of my mother. "Please, honey, all we want to do is chat." I said nothing. More hammering. "You cannot ignore us indefinitely." "I can indeed," I said to myself in a whisper. Before abandoning up, they stayed for about an hour. My mother texted me one last time that evening. "You'll regret this one day. We won't be there when you need us. I hope all is well with you." They were prevented by me. 3 months have passed since then. Since then, distant relatives have sent me sporadic updates. My parents' home had to be sold. My father was compelled to return to work. My mom tried her hand at an internet business. It didn't work. Nancy, still resentful. I continue to gripe about my selfishness and lack of gratitude as a brother to everyone who would listen. I don't care about any of it anymore. And what do you know? I'm not guilty, not even a shred, because I'm free for the first time in my life. That's it. Tell me, was this the only way to eventually get out? Or was I being too harsh?